Vice Mayor, are you here? Okay, good. So I have a request from our city manager to move item 12 to March 15th. That's our housing element item. And so I think it's better that we consider that at this point as opposed to possibly waiting up to another hour and then making that decision so that we can be considerate of the public's and our consultants' time. So let me gauge the temperature of council here. So our internal estimate has the housing element at 90 minutes and the budget item at 45. I mean, I can see budget easily going over that. And I think if we introduce housing element anytime after 11, it is likely to go past midnight. So would anyone like to bring a motion at this point that we continue the housing element item until March 15th? Vice Mayor, let me go on Councilmember Moore first. Her hand is raised.
So moved.
Vice Mayor, did you have input or would you like to second?
I'm concerned about the timing. So I'm concerned about the stakeholder group, which did not really follow council direction. And if we postpone to the 15th, are they going to continue the stakeholder group as the current plan, which I would rather they don't until we have a discussion on what the council would like to see. So that's the thing. But if it comes back on the 15th, I think today I don't see any housing element site list. I would have liked that. If that could be available on the 15th, that's good.
Okay, well, you've got your input points in. Would you like to second the motion that's on the table to move item?
So so my question is, if we move to 15, would they not conduct any meeting on the stakeholder group until we get to decide? That's my question. If yes, then I'll second the motion.
So let me go to our city manager at this point who has a hand raised. Jim, did you have a feedback?
Oh yeah, I can't tell from where I'm looking right now if Ben is still out there.
Ben is there. He just turned his camera on.
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask Ben to chime in real quick.
Okay, Director Fu.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. I'm still here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Vice Mayor, if council decides to continue this item tonight to whichever future date, that will be the date that council will be reviewing and determining the stakeholders' decision.
Okay, so I second the motion.
Okay, so that's the second, and we have a motion on the table. Let me go ahead and do this since we have a motion on the table, and some direction as well. City Attorney Jensen, since this is essentially procedural, I do see a hand raised from the public. What is your advice here with regard to taking public comment on this?
Yes, if the council is so the item was agendized, and so the public would have the opportunity to comment. If the matter is not heard, the comment could be at the next meeting.
So that'd be basically
the 15th.
Okay. Well, let me do this
correct.
then. Since the item is being proposed for a continuation, and I'm basically taking a procedural vote here. Let's so advise our members of the public with their hands raised. This, if this motion passes, this will continue to March 15th, and you can make your comment on the item at that time. So, Madam City Clerk, if you could please conduct a roll call vote on this motion.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having second thoughts because the timeline is still missing. The site list is not there. I actually think we should have a short discussion on what we expect to come back on the 15th and then continue the item. So maybe we should do that discussion later. That way on the 15th, when it comes back, it has better information that we expect.
Okay, so you're pulling your second of the motion,
Yeah.
which is, I think, within your right. The reason I'm trying to bring this right now is that I want to make sure that we're not holding on to people another hour who are here for item number 12. However, I'm reluctant to have a substantive discussion on this at this point. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute, not substitute, rather, I'm going to second the motion that's on the table. And so I would like to call for a vote, and I respect your input point, Vice Mayor, but I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. Councilmember Moore, you have a hand raised on this.
Just a suggestion, Mayor Paul, and if you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But alternatively, could we continue item 11 for the mid-year financial report, and then hear 12, the housing element update tonight, if you
I
prefer?
think that's an option as well. City Manager Troop, did you have feedback on that since
Yeah,
you're...
my only concern is we're getting right into the budget season right now. So this was the first kickoff of getting that done. And so pushing that out could cause some delays on the budget side. And I don't know if Christina has any.
What if we put it at the beginning of our special meeting next Tuesday on the 8th? Would that be more workable since it's a shorter item too?
Yeah, I forgot we were having, is Christina or Zach, would that, you guys out there, they're out there somewhere.
Yes, that should work.
That would work?
Okay. Okay, well, Councilmember Moore, would you modify your motion to continue this item to our special meeting on March 8th for item number 11? Since that's what you're suggesting.
Okay, I'm a little confused because my motion was to continue the housing element update originally, but now we are going to keep item 12 as planned, but continue item 11 to March 8th. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just listening to your words, Councilmember Moore, and that's what you had suggested, to move item 11 instead of item 12 forward. So then you would be withdrawing your motion. Okay.
And I just replaced it. Okay.
Okay. So Vice Mayor Chow, are you seconding?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, great. Let's conduct a roll call vote on that. Then, and just to remind everyone, this is to continue item number 11 to our March 8th special meeting.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, well, we're now on, thank you very much. We are now on item 12. Item 12 is the progress update of the housing element update, and review, discuss, and approve selection of stakeholders group is the subject as written in our agenda. So let's go ahead and I'll hand it over to our city manager, Jim Troop. Would you like to introduce the staff member that will be introducing or presenting the presentation on this item?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, I'd like to introduce Ben Fu. He's our Director of Community Development, and he will be the lead-off hitter for this.
Thank you, City Manager Troop, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the introduction of the item. Good evening, City Council members. Ben Fu, Director of Community Development. With me tonight, we have our consultant, Andy Flower from EMC Planning Group, as well as the project coordinator, senior planner, Luke Connolly, and planning manager, Pugh Ghosh, both are from the planning division within our community development department. Tonight, what we intend on providing is an update to our housing element update process. As you may be aware, last time that you heard from us from our consultant was probably around Thanksgiving time. And so we since then had multiple hearings, and we had a public work session. We had a housing commission meeting, a couple planning commission meetings. We're supposed to have a third planning commission meeting on the subject of the sites analysis this past yesterday, but due to short turnaround time, that's being pushed out for a little bit. So tonight, what we intend on doing is provide an update and also have the discussion on the stakeholders group membership decision for you to make. With that, I think I will hand off to Andy Flower principal for EMC planning group to continue the bulk of this presentation. Andy, are you online yet?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction. And I'll begin with my presentation now.
Great. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Very good. So tonight, as Mr. Fu introduced, we will be checking in with an update on our progress for the housing element update. And we'll be discussing next steps. We'll also, I can't seem to progress my slide. I'm not sure why. It worked a minute ago. There we go. So our presentation this evening, we'll be talking just briefly about the sites inventory, progress, and next steps. We'll review this stakeholder group, and we have some questions for council, and we welcome feedback. We'll also be discussing a little bit about next steps with community engagement. And as I mentioned, we welcome your feedback. So with our process for site selection, these are our three main topics and contributors for getting to the final site selection list. So we'll be working with public and council. We'll continue to work with public and council and decision makers. And we'll be integrating ideas of equity, and we'll be working with property owners. And through this, you can see that there's a convergence that leads us to the eventual sites. One of the newest pieces of information that we've brought forward to the Planning Commission and to the public is an understanding of where the schools are in relationship to where households are with children. And this is only one component of many factors that we're considering as we consider expanding our sites list. What we see here in purple are all sites within the city that are between 1/2 acre and 10 acres, which is sort of the minimum category by which HCD recognizes a site as reasonable. We will be culling this list, but we wanted to go as broad as possible initially. We understand that there are a number of pipeline projects that are underway that have been entitled but are awaiting building permit issuance. Those sites we will factor into our program and process, and we'll be bringing that forward as staff is able to bring us a fully, and not just us, but also council with their annual progress report to HCD. What you see here are some blue circles, and they're surrounding some higher density residential zoned areas. And the question that we posed when we were at the Planning Commission was, now that SB 9 is a factor for housing and consideration, which enables up to 2 duplexes on a single parcel of land, then what does that mean for these areas that were intended to be higher density than that single family residential? So we'll be moving forward with consideration for no net loss in these areas and bringing forward some options to discuss going forward. So our next steps for the sites inventory, as I mentioned, we are seeking clarity about pipeline projects and ADU numbers, and that will also be presented to council by staff. We'll be bringing forward our Cupertino Housing Simulator 2.0, and we'll be inviting those who have participated in this mapping exercise with the first round to be our beta testers. We'll incorporate their advice to make it as fun as possible and interactive as possible. We'll also be bringing forward some companion documents for the simulator, meaning a person who wants to participate with this mapping exercise, you'll be able to research sites and research different approaches through the website. And if need be, if some folks prefer to maybe print something out and take notes, we'll have that available as well. We also warmly invite all decision makers, including council, planning commissioners, housing commissioners within the city, to act as ambassadors for participation, and really just inviting neighbors and family and everyone you know to help bring this vision forward for Cupertino. One of the things I want to mention early on, as far as approaches or strategies as we continue to think about sites, is if to imagine what your personal goals are for the community as you understand these concepts, and we'll certainly have opportunities for discussing these concepts. So if the amount of potential rezoning or sometimes upzoning it is a bigger concern for you than the number of sites, we can see here that there is an inverse relationship between the number of sites and the amount of potential rezoning. So just planting a seed as we move forward into next steps to consider how we might help you understand what your own personal strategies might be and ways that you can use our mapping exercise to communicate that to us so that we can forward that information to decision makers. So stakeholder group, we have moved forward our stakeholder group application. We received many applicants, we received 30 applications for the stakeholder group. And we also included with your packet an HCD letter to Monterey Park. And these two quotes from that letter, we're hoping maybe help all of you, the public and council, understand what our intent has been for this stakeholder group. It's maybe a little outside of what has been typical in the past, but this is information that was brought to Monterey Park as a revision request letter from HCD. And it says the element should describe any specific outreach efforts to organizations that represent special needs populations or members of protected classes, and that the city should conduct targeted stakeholder interviews or establish a committee representative of lower income and special needs households in future public outreach efforts. What we've heard through attending webinars and learning from those who have had early certification rounds with HCD is that as much as the new information is being reviewed in Southern California, and that the stakes are high and the expectations are high, with each round those expectations become even higher. In other words, HCD is expecting each region to learn from the region prior. And I'd be happy to answer any questions around that topic. So this is our list of recommended stakeholders. We did a blind test among 4 on our team, including sub-consultants in both the design and diversity fields. And we included those notes for the top 25 out of the 30 applicants. And as a blind counting up of the scores, these are the top 10 that we found. 2 are candidates with a lived experience similar to desired diversity stated for stakeholder groups. 2 of the candidates had prior housing policy experience in the city, and 6 of the candidates represent voices of those who may not otherwise participate in policymaking discussions, though they are though they are likely to be the people in need of increased housing opportunities. Again, I'm happy to discuss that if there are any questions about that. We also are suggesting that if the council so pleases, there were an additional 3 candidates that were close runners up to the top 10, and those were numbered 18, 26, and 28 within your packet. And these 3, in short description, represent a teacher, a nurse, and a neighborhood volunteer from the neighborhood of Monte Vista. I do want to be clear that the neighborhood of Monte Vista was one of the ones that was in the blue circle. So this is an area that will be a concentration for further discussion for potential, if not sites, possibly sites, but also otherwise there are policies that can be considered for that area for no net loss. So ways to participate. We encourage the public to continue showing up at meetings like this and for planning commission meetings. And for that, we certainly want to extend our invitations in a more regular way. And the city is working with us for that. And we'll be including many opportunities for engagement on the website and with our community workshops and with stakeholder representation. This is the website listed in case there's anybody out there who hasn't seen it. Please drop us a message, and we'd love to hear from you and to work with you throughout this process. So for council feedback, a couple of questions. We're wanting to know if you approve the stakeholder group list. We're happy to answer questions. If you would like us to amend the list, add 3 or more candidates, and we request any guidance that you might have for Planning Commission next steps with sites inventory. That concludes my presentation. I do have the attachments that were included in your packet, and I'd be happy to open up any of those, if I may ask now permission to do so, if that's something that benefits answering a question that a council member may have.
I'm not quite understanding your question, Andy. So open up
Sure.
the packet. Are you talking?
Oh, if during discussion with council, if there's if it's beneficial in answering a council member's question, if I may now ask permission to open up any pieces or pages of the packet that were included.
Oh, of course. You can share your screen and show the public.
Yes.
And the council. Oh, of course.
Correct. Okay, great. Thank you.
So let's do this. Let's go to our members of the public to give us some feedback here. And then we'll go back to council, starting with Councilmember Way, who has a hand raised already, for questions and comments. And so I see one member of the public, now 2, now 3 with their hands raised. And so same procedure, please have your hand raised by the time the first member of the public is done speaking. We have Jenny Griffin as our first speaker, and also Allison Singalani is raising her hand, and Lisa Warren as well at this time. So Jenny, welcome. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? Can you put the unmute up again?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. Yes, I would have preferred this item had been postponed, to start it at an earlier time. I have very, very grave concerns about this entire process, as you all are aware. I'll just start out quickly. My one question, which I do want answered tonight, is whether the public can attend these stakeholder meetings. I want that answered tonight. That is my one concern. The second is that we all need to go through all the sites. I am not willing to have a stakeholder group make the decisions that the public should be having about these sites. This is the 4th housing element round I have gone through with this city since 2001, since I came out of the county with my neighborhood. And we have never had a stakeholder group before. We don't need one. The public is capable. We have spent our time and hours going through meetings until 4 o'clock in the morning. I do not think that we need a stakeholder group. It's like, let's hide it from the public. And also, we need to go through these sites. Okay, I'm going to start out right now. If you're not aware, Santa Monica's housing element was denied by HDC recently. Today, the city of Los Angeles was denied by HCD. HCD said to them, you can rezone by October and rezone 250,000 sites, which is the ridiculous HCD numbers that they have said. This is a vehicle for rapid rezoning. I don't know what road we're going down here with this, with the way Sacramento's acting or HCD. This is like causing bedlam in the city councils. Saratoga right now is so desperate. They are possibly going to rezone Villa Montalvo, and they would probably throw Hakani Gardens in there too. What are we doing? What road to disaster are we on? I just cannot. I understand the city is trying desperately. We're like a hamster on a wheel, but we are being used by our state. And I cannot condone HCD using this like a donkey with a cart, like Putin, to try to force rezoning in this state. I don't know how much time I have. I can't find. Okay, 9 seconds. This is an abomination. It is a circus, and it has to stop. But yeah, you answer my question about the public.
All right, thank you, Jenny. And our remaining speakers are Allison Singalani, Lisa Warren, Jean Bedord, and Neil PM. And so welcome, Allison.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and council members. This is Allison Singalani with SB at Home. I'd like to first thank Councilmember Willie for attending the SB at Home Countywide Housing Element Roundtable for mayors and council members. It was a great conversation. On behalf of SB at Home, I'd like to thank the council staff and consultant team for an excellent list of the top 10 candidates for the Housing Element Stakeholder Group as a significant part of a robust stakeholder engagement process. We appreciate the commitment of the community members who applied, and also the careful and measured process used to select those applicants whose lived experience can best contribute to the requirement to affirmatively further fair housing. Stakeholders are key to showing the required diligent effort to include public participation from all economic segments of the community, and to understanding the needs of community members who may be less likely to come to a council meeting or engagement event and speak up. To that end, HCD specifically requires that key stakeholders engaged in the housing element process include community members who are lower income, people and households with special needs, members of protected classes, advocacy organizations such as those who work with residents experiencing homelessness, independent living centers, public housing authorities, developers, and advocacy groups. It's also important that stakeholder engagement happens early, often, and on an ongoing basis, with a variety of strategies and methods to promote access and with feedback loops to keep stakeholders and individuals informed. I want to acknowledge that this time around, there have been changes in the housing element process and housing law that make this a lot more challenging for staff and consultants than it has been in the past. Ensuring the process meets the standards it's required to, in as many ways as possible, will help Cupertino minimize the back and forth with HCD, saving you time and money and freeing up staff and resources. The investment of time and effort in doing this right is critical for addressing the housing crisis, and the prosperity of the city and our communities depends on addressing the housing crisis. We've seen over the course of the pandemic and even before that people are leaving, families are leaving, young adults who've grown up here can't afford to stay, and people are even being forced into homelessness. Sometimes we think of protecting our community as preserving it as it is, but the housing element is an investment in protecting our community's future by planning for the needs of a diverse economy now. Following the law, adhering to the process is going to result in a housing element that's more likely to achieve success and meeting the community's need for housing in Cupertino. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Our next speaker is Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. And I want to echo, well, that's not really echoing. I'm glad that this was not the item that got postponed or continued, because we're already behind on the stakeholder group calendar that was initially posted in November. The first meeting for the group was supposed to be January 11th. And as Allison just mentioned, the sooner you get that started, hopefully the more community input you will get. Outreach has been an issue. We had 45 people attending this meeting earlier when it was about an access point to a trail. And now there's 15, which is actually a large number for this point, actually for a meeting at all. lately, which is sort of sad, but at least it's more than the 3 or 4 that are normally up there. So I'm glad it wasn't postponed. I'm glad that there's some progress being made in selecting stakeholders meeting and group, and it doesn't have anything to do with me being on the list. It just needs to be done. And I truly believe that these meetings need to be in-person meetings with the stakeholder group, not Zoom meetings. Much more can be done. The interaction will be more real. And I'm hoping that that is what will happen. And if that hasn't been decided yet, my vote is in person, please. So I guess those are my main points. I'm honored to be on the list, but again, I would feel the same way either way. And I think that's probably all I need to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jean.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and council members. Well, I hadn't really planned on speaking on this item. I was planning on listening. However, with Allison's excellent introduction to the needs of the housing element, I can't top that. But I have looked through the entire list of candidates, and frankly, I'm quite impressed with the list of stakeholders that Andy and his staff put together. I think it is well representative of the people who need housing. Now, I'm not particularly well represented, but then again, I'm a homeowner. I've lived here in Cupertino for almost 30 years or so. We need to be listening to the voices of those that we want to attract into our city to revitalize it. Right now, it's stagnant. Oh, it is so stagnant. I think there were like 4 houses changed hands last week. You know, we can't maintain our city at that level. So I urge you to move ahead with this housing element. And Lisa hit it on the head. We need to get moving. Please don't mix up choosing the stakeholder group with the housing inventory. They're 2 different processes. This is it's a very complex process. It's going to have to come together. And it's easier if you bite it off in chunks and then bring it together at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Our next and final speaker is Neil PM. Welcome, Neil. Actually, I don't see Neil's hand raised anymore, but I'll go ahead and, here we go. Welcome.
Sorry about that, my bad. My name is Neil Park McClintock, and I'm speaking as the president of Cupertino for All Today. First, I want to thank the City Council and the consulting team for pursuing a housing element stakeholder group in the first place. The stakeholder group is not in itself sufficient in terms of community outreach. It doesn't meet HCD standards, but it's a good idea that deserves to be well executed. For the selection of this body, I want to thank the consultant team for choosing a broad representation of the community, various ages, backgrounds, and housing stories. For tonight's process of choosing stakeholder members, we need to be mindful that a good faith effort must be made in terms of meeting outreach standards. This means selecting members from these various aforementioned backgrounds. We have a pretty good list before us, and I would support the consultant's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We'll bring this back to council at this point. And so I believe we're going to start with Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. Actually, I have a couple questions for the consultants, but first I'd like to thank the consultants because I think their job is to make sure our city's housing element complies with SCD guidelines and can pass successfully. This stakeholder group, my question for the consultant is, because there are consulting looking at other housing elements that's being HCD letters regarding them, this stakeholder group, is it to make sure that our housing element process complies with the Affirmative Furthering Housing Act? That's my first question. The second question, I think the resident asked, everybody wants a voice. So even with this housing stakeholder group, every resident still has their voice listened to. That's second question I have for the consultant. The third one is, I don't think this group is a secret group, so it's probably should be open, accessible, or people can listen into it. And the third is the three other members that's consulted. You mentioned, Andy, 18, 26, 28, but when I read the lined candidates, they were 18, 16, 28. So is it 16 or 26? Can you confirm that? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Wei. And Andy, did you want to respond to Councilmember Wei's questions at this time?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. Thank you, Councilmember Wei, for your questions. They're very enlightening, and I appreciate your support. And yes, indeed, we are wanting to bring Cupertino into compliance with HCD. That is our highest priority. And in doing so, we want to be mindful of all of the new AFFH laws. And one of the things that we've learned in our webinars and in talking with HCD, they're telling us they want us to get caught trying new things. So there is no one size fits all. There is, as one of the public commenters mentioned, that this in itself, having a stakeholder group, won't be sort of the single thing that gets us across the finish line specifically with AFFH, but it certainly goes a long way in helping us check in regularly with a group of people who we need to make sure that their voices are heard, and we have to go a little bit out of our way to make sure that they have that platform, particularly because whether they are representative or they have had a lived experience themselves, this voice has not always been a part of the policymaking process for housing in the past. And to answer your question about the specific stakeholders, I can share my screen. Trying to make it bigger. Here we go. And let's see, the numbers again were.
And you, in your report,
18.
18,
Yes.
You said 26, 28. I thought it's 18, 16, 28.
Oh, yes, they're the ones that are in green. Here we go. So here's 18 and 16 and number 28.
Okay, so it is 16, not 26, because your report says 26.
Oh, thank you for catching that typo. I apologize for that.
And my other question for you is, even with the stakeholder group, every resident still has a voice in the process, right?
That is absolutely true, 100%. And what we attempt to do is to find ways for people to share their voice in many different forms. So they can certainly leave us comments on the website. There are, I believe there's a survey on the website. We have a map on the website right now if people want to share a location that they would like us to consider for a site. And then through our second iteration of our mapping exercise, there will be multiple new ways to participate and to share specifically about sites. And that's only the first piece of the puzzle. We'll be moving on to policies. It's just that we're very site-centric initially because we need our sites list in order for our environmental analysis to begin. And that's a 9-month process. So that's, if we seem like we're in a bit of a hurry, it's because we're trying to make this deadline. If we don't make this deadline, we do understand that there aren't as many consequences as there once was, in large part because, as another commenter mentioned, that HCD is recognizing this isn't an easy pass, and they want us to they would rather us slow down and do it well, particularly with AFFH. It's can be very expensive and a time drain to have to go back from the beginning.
So one of the public comments asked, is this stakeholder group open to the public? Is it a transparent process?
It's certainly a transparent process. And we'll be working with the city to understand how the technology they have available, what sort of availability we'll have for enabling that transparency. In other words, whether or not it would be a recorded meeting that where people can comment, that would certainly be lovely if we can make that happen with the technology that's available, but the details haven't yet been discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Wei. So that stands at about 5.5 minutes. So let me go ahead and set that for the rest of council as well. Next, we have Vice Mayor Chow.
So first, the stakeholder meeting, is that going to be a Brown Act meeting that people can provide public comments? And the agenda will be posted, and
I'm going to let the city attorney weigh in on that. My understanding is this would be an ad hoc meeting. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And so it's an ad hoc advisory body. So it is not subject to the Brown Act. There are other ways that we can enable transparency, but there would be no Brown Act requirements.
who are they advising?
Well, they're certainly advising.
They're advising.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, I was just going to say they're certainly advising us as consultants, and that's what we'll be making sure we clarify as we communicate to HCD in how the policies that we're coming up with are tied directly to the needs. And that has been the number one problem that Southern California cities have run into. 70% of the HCD letters have focused on a disconnect between an understanding of the needs and the policy. And sites are much less of an issue in the city of Cupertino.
They are not advising the planning commission or the housing commission or the council. They are advising you. So all their advice will be closed. That's odd.
Well, certainly what we will be bringing the advice. I guess what I would suggest is that we move away. If you don't mind, that we move away from the concept of advice and instead move towards the concept of dialogue. So the dialogue that is shared with this advisory body will be a huge advantage for decision makers to contemplate as you have options before you.
Okay, so actually I went back to look at the November 16th meeting when this was first on the council agenda, and it was never mentioned that the stakeholder meeting will be used for the purpose of affirmatively furthering housing, and the directions or comments from the council at the time were like faith-based groups and different kind of groups. My concern right now is you are changing the direction from the council midterm, maybe because of lack of update to the council, so it was a surprise to me. Now, if we, for the purpose of affirmatively furthering housing, I think the current format, I'm very concerned that the commitment we are asking the applicant for 8 hours commitment for each meeting is turning away a lot of people who could have provided the comments. And also, if we include one senior, this one senior doesn't represent all the seniors. We are falling to the false perception that somehow one person with a certain identity represents everyone. I thought that initially the targeted stakeholder group, as the Monterey Park direction says, it would not be, it's not achieved by this stakeholder group. The targeted stakeholder interviews would be, for example, we invite a group of seniors, interview them, a group of unhoused people, interview them, a group of renters of different ages, interview them. We get a spectrum of views, not just one person represent a group. This person is not really representative of anyone. So I feel that right now, this format, we are very limited. And only people who are very committed are included. And the people who don't have time to participate are left out. And those are the voices we really need to reach out. So that's my concern. Yeah. And then also I have made a request to the staff that in every housing element meeting, we should share correct housing element data for the current cycle so that the public doesn't have misinformation as they seem to have every time. So this is the 5 housing element sites we have in the current cycle, and they are all approved. The false perception that somehow Cupertino choose sites that are not suitable for housing is false. And even though our allocation this cycle is about 1,000 units, we approved almost 3,500 units. And out of these 3,500 units, unfortunately, only 300 something units is built. But with 100 allocation, our performance is about 30%. I think someone said like 4% last time. I hope, and this is only the data from early 2020. So it doesn't include the Westport and all the other new projects we approved. So I hope the staff share this accurate data before each housing element presentation so that the public has the correct data of our current performance every time. Thank you. And another thing I keep asking from the first meeting is timeline. I still don't see a timeline. The staff report states that the housing element can be presented to the city council by the state on January 31st. This is a bit confusing. My understanding is
Okay, Vice Mayor, you've gone quite a bit over, so let me go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I try to give you
so please give us a timeline next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's go on to Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. So I'm wondering who it looked like Los Gatos Planning Commissioner and somebody who worked for West Valley Community Services got on your list, but when I look at the list of your top 10, I'm not seeing the name, and I pulled up the Planning Commission agenda out of Los Gatos, and I should be able to see that name. So I personally I'm dismayed at that selection, especially since you're stating that you've been working with West Valley Community Services. In fact, you're saying that you've had biweekly meetings since September of 2021, which would mean you've had 13 meetings with West Valley Community Services. And at this time, I think we've had 3 meetings for the city council. And so I'm a little surprised that you're spending most of your time working with West Valley Community Services and not talking to the city. Also, with regards to outreach, if you look at the Saratoga website for their housing element, they've got at least 4 postcards been sent out to their community in English and Chinese. I believe we've had 1 postcard go out here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the outreach has not been good. I'm very concerned about the stakeholder group. I think it's going to be very off-putting for the other residents, and you have actually more people in your stakeholder group than you got out of the 7 individuals who provided input to the Planning Commission for some of their graphing information that they had a few weeks ago. So that's pretty concerning. So personally, I'd rather that the stakeholders attend the meetings and on equal footing with the rest of the residents, and that the outreach is brought up to the standards of Saratoga, for instance, in 2 different languages at least, in order to bring more people into the group. and it really improve that outreach. So I'm going to start with those comments and then move on in a minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. That was a little over 2 minutes. So let's go on to Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll start with just a couple comments on what I feel, we as elected officials truly have to understand. We were chosen by the community to represent them. And we need to be sure that what we're doing to the absolute best is going to meet with the community. Yes, we hear about welcoming all these new residents to the community. Yes, absolutely. But we were elected to represent the current residents that are here, and we got to make sure we understand that and keep that first and foremost. That being said, we have a mandate from Sacramento, and we understand the importance of it, and we understand that it's going to have a big impact on this community. So that's kind of the overall, now to some of the specifics. I was going to toss out, when I looked at the stakeholder list, to me, it just doesn't have enough individuals to truly be statistically significant. And so I was going to suggest at a bare minimum that there be 3, and they could all be working essentially in parallel. So if you're having a stakeholder meeting, you've got a presentation for them, and then they're going to be generating some output. There's no reason why you couldn't have 3 tables with 10 people on a table at Community Hall and leverage your time commitment. But I actually like what Vice Mayor said. Get a stakeholder group that represents the different groups within the community, a group of seniors, a group of renters, such that each of those groups, even 10, I think would still be marginal in terms of statistically meaningful for the overall 64,000 people in Cupertino. I think it still needs to be bigger than that. But I would be in favor of that. Whether or not you're able to move in that direction, but I would sure think that first and foremost, we've got to be more capturing of the community that's here and making sure they're giving us statistically significant input, where we're going to be putting the housing, what density we're going to be having, what types of BMR or VLI we're going to be having to try and meet these state mandates within the best that we can for the community that's here. So a timeline would really help. Flash that at the beginning of any of our meetings, I think, is very helpful. The finance tends to do it where they show here we are in the budget process, so that we can kind of really see where we've been, where we are, and how much more do we have to go. So Andy, thank you for your efforts there. I realize we're really making a lot of work for you, but this is not an easy task for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, John. A little over 4 minutes there. So let me go ahead and bring it back to Vice Mayor Chow. Before I do that, let me just say, for the stakeholder group meetings, I am a bit compelled by the notion of, if we're able to do it, having live meetings so that people can have more of that direct interaction. So that's my comment from what I've heard and read so far. Vice Mayor Chow. So Vice Mayor, let's go ahead and put you at a couple more minutes here. And if we have further hands raised, we'll visit those at that time. Vice Mayor?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I actually like the way it worked with the Valco specific plan. I think the consultant interviewed with many groups for 1 or 2 hours with like Better Cupertino, Rotary Club, Lions Club, just church-based Facebook. I think this would be great if we can use the same format, or each of these current stakeholder person can invite their group so that there is a more targeted interview. And then another thing is it's true that in Southern California, only 9 cities housing element is certified. I think 190 is not. The reason is I heard that cities submit their housing element on time, but HCD took 3 months to come back with a comment and say that you don't qualify. And the city didn't have time to really adjust. So I'm really concerned about timeline, and I still don't see the timeline. January 31st is the deadline, but that is not the deadline for the council to approve. That's the deadline for HCD to certify. Yes, there is 120 days of grace period, but still there, at this time, the state is making it much, much harder for cities. And another thing I would like to request is for the housing element to specifically list the total amount of dollars we need to build the BMR units assigned to us, which is a little over 1,900 below market rate units. At 750,000 per unit, which is the amount it took for Veranda project before the pandemic. Now the cost I heard is 40–50% more because of the increase in labor and construction costs. So if we count that, that means we need $1.25 billion just for Cupertino. Divide that by 20,000 households. We need about 9,000 per household per year to provide all the 1,900 below market rate units. It's not required by HCD, but I would like the city to provide this data to HCD. They want us to deliver. They should know how much they should subsidize this housing. So please include that in the housing element.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. I have a hand raised from Councilmember Moore, so we'll go to Councilmember Moore.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Paul. So kind of following up with what the Vice Mayor is saying there, the 1,900 approximately BMR units. So Valco will likely pull their permits for this next cycle. So that puts us at 700 approximately, remaining very low and low income units as far as I know. To the City of Monterey Park letter, I think it was an interesting inclusion because it seemed to be kind of a warning to other cities and ours in particular because it was included. But I do want to point out there one paragraph on page 2 when they talk about the sites inventory. They say the element, this is to Monterey Park, the element must include an analysis demonstrating whether sites identified meet the RENA, that they are distributed throughout the community in a manner that affirmatively furthers fair housing. Most of the sites identified in their inventory are concentrated in the northern part of the city, so they're kind of getting called out on this. The element illustrated in their figures that sites in the northern section of the city are areas that have higher concentrations of segregation and poverty. One of the things that I've noticed for the early iterations in Cupertino is that, one, we've got the concentration of BMR units at the Valco site, 1,201 very low and low income units there. So we have a concentration in that particular area, and that we aren't doing equitable distribution across the city. So that leaves just the 700 units, which need to have locations elsewhere. Going back to the transparency issue that we have, and I think it's severe, actually, that the ad hoc committee it doesn't sound like they're going to have any meeting minutes at this point. There will be no recordings of it, and they will be influencing directly our consultant. And then the other part is what kind of information do we have about these 13 or so West Valley Community Services meetings that have already been held? I'd like to hear what were the topics of discussion. I'd kind of like to have a billing accounting for how much those meetings actually ended up costing. There were documents which were apparently generated. I'd like to see what was posted and distributed. And then moving forward, we need to have information about what's going on with these particular meetings as well. Because ordinarily you would the advice would come to council, and then council would talk to the consultant, and you're trying to work this a different way, where you've got a separate group that the way it's set up right now, they will be meeting in secret and talking to our consultant, and that's not transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Vice Mayor Chow, let me. I don't see any further hands raised, so I'll go ahead and bring it back to you at this point.
So yeah, I would like the same information for the West Valley Community Service meetings. I think it's great that you are meeting with them, because they are one of the group that we should reach out to under the AFF, the Affirmatively Further Fair Housing rule. And however, there are other, I think, below market rate manager in our city, Hello Housing, right? So how about a meeting like this, but include multiple affordable housing and service providers? That probably will give us more perspectives since the consultant is spending time. And I would like to meeting minutes, meeting participants, what exactly we expect is as the outcome. And another thing is, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, there has been no notification to the resident from those who signed up for the city e-notification list for housing element. And there has been no notification from those who signed up to engagecupertino.org, except one message back in December for community workshop and the survey. That's all. And yesterday, the email blast was sent out because I requested to be sent out. Otherwise, there will be no notification for even this meeting. This is really unacceptable when we know that we are lacking engagement. How come we are not sending information out when Planning Commission meets, when West Valley Community meets? That should be sent out so people know they are meeting. Yeah, so I hope we come up with a plan to improve on that. I don't want to come to the next council meeting and then here we are still not doing enough. I hope the staff provide us a plan. Postcards are sent out. What are they? West Valley community meetings are designing, I think, outreach materials. I want to see them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Councilmember Moore, and then I will ask for a motion after this comment.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I just want to suggest that other members here that you look at the Saratoga housing element. Just Google it and look at their site. And if you scroll down to the bottom for resources, they have at the very bottom, they have the HCD housing element site inventory guidebook, which is quite useful. But also what you'll notice down there is they starting March 21st, citywide postcard in English and Chinese, April 21st, community meeting presentation slides, June 21st, another postcard in English and Chinese, and then the community meeting presentation slides, September, a citywide postcard in English and Chinese, and then in December, another citywide postcard where they are each step, they're getting a little bit closer, showing their sites. And I feel like we are woefully behind on our community outreach, and we need more of these postcards being sent to people so that they know that this is going on. You know, having the little QR code is very helpful. But I think that we can do better for providing information about what this process is and getting the word out. And I'm very worried that this stakeholder group is just going to be an enclave that's out separately speaking to the consultant, when we actually want more of these meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council with the people who would have been on the stakeholders group, but coming to the meeting and speaking rather than being separated off and having these non-transparent conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, before I take it back to Vice Mayor Chow, let me ask a question of our consultant. So how about speaking to this concern with regard to transparency and the stakeholder groups? I mean, I did hear what you're saying in terms of, you know, a prospective exploration of technology, but I mean, why not just have, you know, why not just have live meetings open to the public, you know, if we can, you know, and try to make sure that there's that availability for people to engage. Is there, you know, is there an issue with that if we're assuming that we're able to do that, you know, from you know, restrictions-based perspective?
Just to be clear, you're asking for live in-person meetings, and is that correct? Yes. And I think if that's something that the city of Cupertino can support, I'm certain that that's something that we can do. It has always been intended for it to be transparent. There's nobody who's said otherwise, and we are good at note taking. We'll certainly share notes, and if it's able to be live, you know, that would be, if maybe what you're suggesting is a hybrid, we'd be happy to consider that as well. I don't know if it might be more exclusive if it's a live event rather than being available on Zoom at this point in time. I have heard, and we have David on the line right now, who regularly does Zoom meetings and has attempted some hybrid meetings in other communities. So he could speak to what kind of success there might be for that. We want to set Cupertino up for success based on experience. If I may, I would like to speak about a couple of other things. Sure. As far as, thank you. So focus groups, I believe that's what Vice Mayor Chow was suggesting, and we have attempted that. We have sent out invitations to multiple specific groups, and that was included in your staff report, or at least in our memo. We have not heard back from any of them. So that doesn't seem like an opportunity for us moving forward. We can't force people to attend. There was also a suggestion that for people who want to dedicate less than 8 hours towards each of these meetings that we might have, and I want to say that for folks who have less time than that to commit, we have lots of other opportunities that will be unrolled throughout this process where people can attend and not have that kind of commitment. But because we want to make sure that the information that we bring forward is aligned with what HCD is looking for, and can provide the decision makers with as much discourse and discussion in tandem with the options that we bring forward. It's the dialogue that we'll be bringing forward. That's the richness of the stakeholder group, is the dialogue that comes out of it. They won't be guiding our decisions as much as providing to you context that HCD is looking for. This is the piece that's been lacking in all of the Southern California cities, is that ability for the meaningful actions or policies that are being proposed, that it tie back to an understood and heard need. So if we don't have the stakeholder group that enables us to actually hear that need, then we will not succeed in time, just as these Southern California cities have not succeeded in time. If I may, I do want to share my screen. Councilmember Moore brought up a point that I quickly did some analysis and realized we were trying to turn around things so quickly from when our stakeholder list was evaluated and when we could prepare it for the council meeting. And I deeply apologize. What I was able to discover is, well, so we buried the names so deep as we did our blind review that I could see that these top 3 names were obviously among our top 10. So this would be our amended list that we would like to go forward with if there is a motion this evening.
So what's the list of 10 and what's the list of 13?
So this is now the list of 13. The first 3 have been added. As Councilmember Moore noted, when she mentioned Kylie Clark, I did a search on the materials that we provided for WVCS and discovered that, and I cross-examined that that number was SHAPP 06, and I could see that, in fact, that person was in our top 10. So the recommendation would be that we would expand the list to 13 so that we could be sure to include those 3 that were originally part of the top 10.
Okay, let me go to Councilmember Moore at this time. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. I'm looking at the Housing Element Advisory Board out of Los Gatos as an example. And on their board, they have 2 council members, 3 planning commissioners. I'm not familiar what the GPC commissioner acronym means, but they have 4 of those. And then they have 4 residents and they mentioned 2 staff liaisons, but I don't believe they're board members. But I just want to point out that, 5 of their individuals are from the planning or council there, and that there are only 4 residents on that that advisory board, which they have there. So I'm unable to approve this stakeholder group as we see it at this time.
May I respond, because Los Gatos is our client, so I can speak very personally to what the Housing Element Advisory Board is and how it is very different from what we're doing here in Cupertino. That board was formed by the city, by the town, let me be specific, before we arrived, and it was intentional in large part to carry over those who have been deeply involved with the general plan update process, because this is one element within that general plan. Their update is not complete yet. Their intention was to have it complete last fall. They're getting close, but the same folks who were working with the general plan some of them have evolved and now are part of this Housing Element Advisory Board. And that makes a whole lot of sense, because everything within a general plan is integrated in with the housing element. So it's helpful and useful to have their knowledge. I can also tell you that our meetings with WVCS, that they involve Los Gatos as well. And so we will be holding a meeting together with them tomorrow a 101 on housing, where numerous community-based organizations have been invited as both panel and attendees, and there will be breakout rooms. And this is the way that we are approaching AFFH by outreach, working with the region. And that's essential for all of these communities because we are in a highest resource area as recognized by HCD. So that means that the community, the population that we would like to house in the future in this community and in Los Gatos, what you have in common is that you have to think regionally if you're going to approach affirmatively furthering fair housing, because the population who would like to live in your community, who HCD wants to know that you're communicating with, are not necessarily living in your community now. I hope that helps some contextual information. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Yes, Mayor Paul, I'm concerned because I've already talked about transparency, and now we're getting a different list, and I'm still, taking issues with it. I would prefer that we come up with a kind of a different arrangement than this particular stakeholder group. Not sure what that would be, but I'd like perhaps some brainstorming is in order.
No, I mean, I didn't see these additional 3 names previously, and I was looking at the presentation earlier. So, I mean, this is not a slide that I'm familiar with. But let me go to Councilmember Way at this time. Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. So I'd like to ask Andy a question. So these 3 are not the numbers we're looking at 18, 16, and 28?
That's correct. But even if we were to add them as well, if we were to have a full 16, that would get all members on that stakeholder group flexibility, so that if not everybody could show up at one meeting, that we could feel confident that we could have that full 10.
Okay, and my second question to you is, you are our consultant, and I think you're doing, so you really need to explain to us when you just explained you're meeting with West Valley and other stakeholders outside of Cupertino for the reason so that we can, the housing element eventually developed can satisfy HCD's requirement guidelines, and so that we're not being issued more letters and more letters. And I really want to emphasize, correct me if it's wrong, our timing is really short. I think Saratoga started a long time ago than we did. And so we don't have time to waste. Is that a correct estimate?
That's absolutely correct, because we know in Cupertino that we will have to execute an environmental impact report, and our team is expert at that. And but at the same time, that is at least a 9-month process. So until we have.
Okay, so my second question is, I heard my colleagues on council, they seem to want to, I mean, we want more participation. Is that not part of the HCD's guidelines, or can you explain it to us? If we want more participation, how we can do it, or is it not advisable to do it? Or, like Councilmember Moore said, Los Gatos has another, and you said that's a general plan amendment, it's a different committee. Do they have a stakeholder committee, a separate stakeholder committee?
They don't, but that's part of how we're supporting them with working closely with WVCS.
I see. Okay. So
and we absolutely want as much participation as we possibly can. We've been surprised as consultants by the low numbers of attendance that we've had in the workshop and for trying out our mapping exercise. And we're working with staff to streamline the communications. I believe that's going to be better going forward. We have a lot of new staff and a lot of new technology, and everybody understands the importance and the high priority and the high stakes for having robust outreach and communication.
Okay, so I do subscribe to city email, so I do receive a lot of emails. So I wonder, is it because we don't have a lot of people subscribe to it, or do you know if our staff can analyze why we're not getting participation?
Well, we can do a whole lot of reaching out and inviting people, but in the end, people also need to decide that they want to participate. So we are exploring as many different ways as we possibly can and experimenting with different ways with our other clients and bringing what works to Cupertino for helping there to be a diversity of ways to participate and a diversity of ways to get engaged and involved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not hearing a motion forthcoming at this point, but let me go to Vice Mayor Chow and then Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So I am subscribed to the CTE notification for all notifications. I searched my email. There was no notification except the December 7th community workshop. That was it. Okay, the problem is not people are not signing up. It's because we didn't send them information. Okay, now as for community groups who didn't respond, do you just give up? No one told the council, we can help connect you to community leaders who are connected to the group. This is how that worked in Valco specific plan. This is why I keep saying for community engagement, why are we reinventing the wheel every time? What worked last time? Who we contacted last time? The name should be there. And then if they, usually people don't know what this is about. If you say, do you want to participate? They don't know, they won't respond. But then you need someone to really call them up to say this is important. Then they would respond. So they are not responding. And then we say this doesn't work. That seems really odd. And then the second thing is, I think what we really need to know is the 9 cities with certified housing element, what did they do? We don't need to know Monterey Park didn't work. We need to know those 9 cities, what did they do? I don't think the current structure of the stakeholder group even meet the HCD requirement because you are pulling one person representing a group. That really doesn't meeting the requirement of getting the input. One person doesn't represent a group. We need to reach out to a group, to multiple people. Maybe one person can invite 5. Then we can have an interview. So I wish the hours that you are spending meeting with committee members, rather it should be spent with a more wider audience. Yeah, maybe it's in Cupertino, maybe outside. But let's first find out what those 9 certified housing element has so that we know what HCD is looking for. And then we can talk about that. Yeah, it might be too late, but let's do that. And another thing is the 0.5 acre. I read the HCD memo. It didn't really say only sites between 0.5 and 10 acres are considered. It just says 0.5 and above is considered affordable. 0.5 and below are possible. It's just they don't consider that density is good enough for so-called affordable housing, but it still be considered. How did I know that? I read HCD memo. I think Andy, you should know by now that this council really want technical information. So please provide all the technical instruction from HCD to Planning Commission and the city so that we don't get very vague instruction. We want specific direction from the HCD, then we can better understand and help you with this process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. So I want to take issue with this selection process of the stakeholder group. In particular, the individual that works for West Valley Community Services when you are already consulting with West Valley Community Services and the city gives hundreds of thousands of dollars to West Valley Community Services, including our homeless work program that we've initiated through Councilmember Willie's suggestion, and that this individual is a planning commissioner from Los Gatos. I frankly question your judgment and ability to choose with that. Now, when I look at Saratoga, they had more than 550 residents sit in on a 7-hour meeting where Saratoga City Council reviewed a list of 9 potential sites. That was January 11th. 550 residents showed up in Saratoga. So I talked about all the postcards that they sent out. They did it in English and Chinese. They ended up with 550 residents at that meeting. So I think we need to cast a wider net across the community, do the postcards. I can't vote in support of this stakeholder group because I don't feel that there's been enough outreach to get a wide enough range of applicants. And like I said, I question the judgment of your choices, especially them being so high on your list. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Willie. Councilmember Willie, let me ask, also generally, is there anybody that would like to bring a motion to the table at this point? Because I not hearing one, I will ask for the default, which I think is to approve the stakeholder recommendation. And there was a question as to whether we expand it. Councilmember Willie, your hand is raised next. Do you want to speak to that? Or did you have another comment you wanted to make?
You're catching me off guard on that. My brain is in a different area right now.
Okay, well, make your comment and then I'll renew the question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't want to, I'm hoping Andy isn't being scared away with all the comments. I would probably like to ask that the city manager, at least toss this out, and as a council, does it ring with the rest of them? I have for 3 years now, I have been trying to get the previous city manager to accept that we need a resident engagement owner within the city staff, and always get pushback. And we just did a housing survey. Once again, it was like pulling teeth, and couldn't get the city to do the housing survey. So we had to approve a subcommittee to then, force a city survey. Bear with me here, because I think it speaks to the problem when we don't have the community engagement process established, the owner within the city. Somebody like Andy comes in from the outside and works his tail off, but doesn't have the support from within the city. Parks and Rec has done surveys. Usually they get, 150 to 200 survey takers. That housing survey that it was Vice Mayor, me, 2 housing commissioners, forced that housing survey, and we wouldn't let staff just put out for 2 weeks. No, that's not enough to get the resident engagement that we felt was important. 4 weeks. And at 4 weeks, we said we wanted to keep it open another 2 weeks. And the end result, almost 1,000 people took the housing survey.
Yeah.
Now, with that information, it resides in the city staff right now. Carrie was the one from staff that was assigned to the housing survey. We should be leveraging, we should be building on that. We've got 1,000 residents that took the housing survey. They would be great candidates if, the first used the same process that they used, and they didn't, a little confusing there, but use the process that they used, learn from that, lessen the amount of work that you have to do to try and beg people to come and sign up, because this resident engagement, like I say, they're the ones that put us on this city council, and we really need to hear from them. And I get lots of emails. I met with one group on Monday at noon. And again, I'm telling them, I'm here listening to you guys, or tonight at the Ragnar Creek cross through at De Palma. I'm telling them, we need to be hearing from all our residents. They don't all want to communicate with us, but we need to be letting them know. And the ones that will, wow. So the message would be to the city manager, set up somebody who has ownership that's going to consolidate all the different types of surveys that have been done and how did we get the participation, things on secondhand smoke, things about the weed blowers. I mean, they've done so transportation surveys, and bring all that under one envelope. The one person doesn't have to do it all, but they need to be the expert, and then they could help Andy with his big job for this housing element. So again, I just worry that Andy's left with all of our concerns and stuff without the assistance from staff that has been there before. So on the one-on-ones with the city manager, I'll be promoting, once again, that we need somebody to be an owner for resident engagement in our community and raise the bar. So I'll leave it at that, but keep up the work, Andy.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Willie. Councilmember Way.
Oh, are you calling me, Mayor Paul?
Yes, your hand's raised.
Oh, okay. So here, I think we are hearing two different things. The list that Andy presented actually is I do trust this our consultants' expertise is to really help us to reach out to residents who are not here. So this, I'm really okay with the list, the 13 plus the 3, and I would make a motion because this is just one group, and we still have a lot of opportunities, like Councilmember Willie says, to reach out to all the other groups and have more meetings. But it looks like if I understand it correctly, we need this group to have a dialogue with the consultant and provide input to the council when decisions being made, so that HCD knows that we have reached out to a broader group. And this is, so I think we're scared that this is a stakeholder, that we're only going to listen to them. I see this as a small part of a housing elements, that we're reaching out to a group that we need to have a voice to consult with, to tell us what they need. So they're not making any decisions, if I understand correctly. Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I would like to make a motion to include the 16. So that's a broader, and start to have a dialogue so that we can have elements that satisfy HCD's requirement, that we are listening to a group that usually don't have a voice, and they're very widespread, representing renters and different groups. So I really think because our time is so short, we need to move forward, but we still can do all the rest that we recommended, that we can reach out to everybody. And like Councilmember Willie says, reach out to the emails we already got, and then start to have more dialogues. But this group's dialogue, if I understand correctly, is very important element that HCD would consider our housing element complying to the affirmatively furthering Fair Housing Act, so that we are listening to, we get a dialogue and they get their opinions, so let us listen to it. Andy, correct me if that's not if I understand it incorrectly.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. Yes, and I agree that this is one piece of it, and we can continue to reach out and see if people are ready, willing, and able to be part of focus groups. And if what people need in order to show up is a personal invitation from a council member rather than a staff member or a consultant, then we are happy to take that step. And we hope that you'll partner with us and be ambassadors with us. And we want all kinds of perspectives to be. This is part of your general plan, and a general plan is intended to be a reflection of the community desires, the community vision, and it's inclusive, absolutely inclusive. And we hope that you'll partner with us in helping us form those additional focus groups. And we also can have ways that they can communicate directly in our web pages. And by the way, that's in multiple languages, and we intend to continue providing information in multiple languages. And we're more than happy to do more postcards, and we can do a banner that scares everybody, like they've done in Saratoga, scares everybody into contributing and showing up at council meetings. We can make sure that happens.
So Mayor Pro, can I ask one more question?
Well, you placed a motion on the table. I want to check in to see if there's a second for the
Okay.
motion. So let me check in with council. Will anyone second Councilmember Way's motion? And Vice Mayor Chow, I see you have your hand raised. Did you want to second it?
I have a replacement motion.
Well, there's no motion on the table. So let me ask Councilmember Willie. Councilmember Willie, did you want to second Councilmember Way's motion?
No, I was going to also suggest a replacement.
A different motion. Okay, well, there's nothing to replace if there's no second for the motion. Okay, well, I haven't really used much of my time, so let me ask Andy. You know, I do see it as kind of problematic with regard to, you know, looking at the other city locally that you're servicing, that, you know, they're somewhat analogous group, although, you know, I concede that they have a different process. They went through a general plan amendment, but they do have a significant number of elected representatives and their appointees in their group. And for me, when I look at it, the only overlap we have with your proposed group and that group is that we also have a member of a Los Gatos appointee, you know, mechanism, but we're not Los Gatos, right? I mean, we are providing much more compensation than Los Gatos to take us through this process. So I'm just wondering, you know, from the perspective of, you know, a stakeholder group that is for Cupertino, whether there would be an ability to add some, you know, elected representatives from our council and perhaps a couple of members of our planning commission. I mean, you know, I feel, you know, when I look at this, you know, I see the 10 names, I saw the extra 3 names, and now there's another 3 names, right, that we've never seen before this evening. I mean, I scoured all of the materials. So I'm just kind of wondering, you know, what's the seeming aversion to kind of, you know, sidestepping our own elected representatives? Because after all, yeah, well, you have your hand raised, so let me finish my question. I mean, after all, you know, other cities are doing it in a similar manner where they actually have their representatives there. So, I mean, what's the issue there?
We're working with different sized communities, and in some of the communities we're working with, there was a desire to have a steering committee that included 2 planning commissioners and 2 council members. And I can personally say that the communities that we're working with where we have that in place, things are going much more smoothly and quickly. And I've been a fan of that, and I have suggested that early on. I am not the one who decides exactly what our path will be. I would not suggest necessarily combining this stakeholder group with a steering committee. It's very different what they have with the Housing Element Advisory Board in Los Gatos.
Who made this decision for you not to have a steering committee in Cupertino? Because that's literally the first I've ever heard of that suggestion.
We walk into the contracts and into the communities, and we work with staff. So with each community, we typically work with whatever structure is available to us. And if there's other structures that we might want to bring over from other communities, we'll suggest it. But whether or not that's something that that staff would support is up to the city.
Yeah, no, I find that really surprising that something as basic as what you're describing wasn't at least vetted with, you know, well, I mean, you know, with me, for instance, or or me and the vice mayor as you know, a couple of representatives from council. So would staff like to speak to that? I mean, was there an opportunity to consider having a steering committee comprised of 2 of our electeds and 2 of our appointees from planning, and then actively rejected? Because, you know, I know that there hasn't been consistency in the city manager position over the course of the last several months, but I know there has been with regard to council. Why wasn't this something that was considered by us?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, this has been food charter community development. At the working staff level, we have a team of your planning staff working with consultant. At the working staff level, we have not had a discussion about setting up a steering committee.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I think we can see what the benefits of that in tonight's exercise would have been, right? Because then there clearly would have been some foreknowledge as to what was being structured and placed in front of us this evening. So that I don't think that really helps us right now with regard to trying to figure out how best to, you know, move forward in a manner that can be, you know, considered, you know, workable, or, you know, without just coming forward with a fully formed, you know, group that, you know, frankly, council has no idea with regard to what the metrics were and input. Same with, you know, planning commission. I mean, it does seem like there is a fairly significant amount of input in other cities that go through, as Andy said, a much more smooth process. So, you know, I wonder, you know, at this point, Andy, if your recommendation is not necessarily to combine a stakeholder group with a steering committee, I mean, what can we be doing right now to, you know, structure this such that there's more input, you know, from a subcommittee of council along the way, you know, going forward?
My recommendation would be to have both, potentially, to have both a stakeholder group and a steering committee, and that the steering committee would be made up of 2 planning commissioners and 2 council members.
Well, I mean, but what would be the point vis-a-vis a stakeholder group that's already been formed, right? In the absence of the existence of a steering committee to begin with. Well, let me go to Vice Mayor Chow and then, you know, Councilmember Woolley at this time. I think you both mentioned that you had some kind of motion of your own to suggest. I will do a time check. It's 11:55. You know, I think we've had, you know, a reasonably good discussion so far, but I will go ahead and hold us to a midnight stop time. And so, you know, with regard to continuing this item, we can continue this item as well. I hope by, you know, having a benefit of some thinking about this, and it's great to air this out. I mean, like, don't think of this as any kind of a loss. This is, you know, like, I also value discussion above and beyond really anything else in public process. So, but I think these are legitimate concerns that are being aired out here. Vice Mayor Chow, did you have a suggestion at this time?
I have it written up.
Okay, great.
Okay. So my motion is to form a council subcommittee to work with the housing consultants and staff for 2 purposes. I think we need 2 different groups. One is general community outreach to leverage existing resources, including but not limited to the list who took the 2021 housing survey, and block leaders, and those who were interviewed for VALCO's specific plan, and recommendations from council members, planning and housing commissioners, and the applicants from the stakeholder group we have identified now. Second, to study the certified housing element from those 9 cities to find out the exact requirements for affirmatively furthering fair housing to ensure that we follow HCD's instruction, because I don't think the current proposed structure satisfies that, because they don't seem to include the voices that usually are not included in the council meeting. So.
Okay, Councilmember Woolley, did you have anything that you wanted to add at this time? I'm just going to carve out about a minute for any further comments, and then I will go ahead and continue this either to the 15th or the 8th. My inclination is to say the 8th and to try to limit it to about an hour with the same as the finance item of about 45 minutes.
So trying to be brief, I share Councilman Way's concern that we need to be making progress, but I do think that one stakeholder group at this point in time, going with the recommendation doesn't do it for me. I would be willing to toss out that if we had 3 stakeholder groups, or we went in the direction where we had representative stakeholder group for each of the different subsets of our community. And we really do have places to tap into. For the seniors, we've got the senior center, we've got age-friendly Cupertino. For parents, we've got PTA that we can go into. For renters, we can put notifications. So we've got these different mechanisms to tap in and have significant number of people, statistically significant number of people to represent these different ones, so that we don't get outliers that really are not reflective of the group.
Let's do this. I'm going to cut you off, John.
If I could just finish this one last thing, I would go with Vice Mayor's thing because she captures the essence of what I was getting at. So
yes, that's what I'm going to suggest. I mean, because you could very well second that motion, but then it would literally just sit there, right, until we continue this. So, I'm going to suggest that we continue this. I think we should take item 11 first and then item 12 on March 8th. I would invite you, each of the council members, without creating a serial communication. So Andy, please don't communicate it to any of the other council members, but for your thoughts in terms of outreach, send them to Andy, and then we can revisit, kind of a consolidated, because we have hired a very capable consultant to, try to consolidate feedback. I think these feedback points are good, but I think they're probably a little bit better absorbed in a written medium as well. So that would be my recommendation. City Attorney Jensen, do you recommend that we take a motion to continue this, or can I just continue it to the March 8th special meeting?
So I think since it's a special meeting, I think you would want it to take a motion and continue it to that date.
Okay, I'm going to move
the default. Otherwise, it goes to a regular meeting.
Great. Okay, thanks very much. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we continue this item to the special meeting of March 8th, 2022, to be heard after item 11. That's already been continued. May I have a second for that motion? I see Vice Mayor Chow, your hand is already raised in Zoom, and Councilmember Willie raised his hand.
Second, but can we get information about the certified housing element by that time, so we know exactly what's the criteria?
Well, the request is in there, so I think that's a request for Andy, possibly our staff, but probably more Andy. In terms of, you're talking about the 9 cities, Vice Mayor Chow, that had successful certified.
Or direction from HCD. I want to know the exact direction. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will say that there's an opportunity for there's an agenda that come out for the special meeting. So perhaps that would be the best way to kind of share that information if it's available. So, okay, motion and a second. This is to continue item 12 to the special meeting on March 8th. I don't see any other further hands raised. So, Madam City Clerk, could you please take a roll call vote on that motion?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Folks, I'm not going to go ahead and finish out the very last item, which I believe is council future agenda items and staff reports. So, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and forego that this cycle, and we'll go ahead and reconvene on March 8th. Thanks very much for a good discussion. I know that these are not easy, items to consider, but, as usual, I think that it's all in our approach and, knowing, I won't dispute the notion that we're having a good ongoing discussion here on all fronts. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you in a week. Meeting adjourned until March 8th.